Today's story is Mafia Boss's sister made every maid quit until a plus-size woman said no. How could one woman make every maid walk away? And what could happen when the next woman finally refused to do what everyone before her had done? Hello, everyone, and welcome. If you enjoy emotional stories about dignity, compassion, justice, and the courage to stand your ground, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Thank you sincerely for watching, supporting, and sharing these stories with us. Tell us in the comments, when someone treats you unfairly, is walking away always the strongest choice, or can staying sometimes require even more courage? Some battles begin without shouting, and some of the strongest answers contain only one word. Now, let's begin today's story. How long did the last one last? Camille Brooks stood beneath the crystal chandelier of the Whitmore mansion, one hand resting on the handle of her suitcase. Mrs. Helen Parker looked at her. 9 days. Camille waited for the smile. None came. You're serious? Unfortunately, morning light spilled through 12-foot windows onto polished marble floors. Everything in the mansion looked expensive enough to make ordinary people afraid of touching it. Camille wasn't ordinary. At 34, she was a beautiful plus-size black woman with warm brown skin, soft curves, natural dark curls, and gentle brown eyes that made kindness seem effortless. But softness had never meant weakness. 6 women in 6 months. Camille asked. Helen nodded. All because of one person? Before Helen could answer, heels clicked against marble. Slow. Precise. A woman appeared at the top of the staircase. Vivian Whitmore. She descended wearing an ivory blouse and tailored black trousers. Every detail controlled from her dark hair to her expression. Her eyes settled on Camille. First her face, then her uniform, then, unmistakably, her body. The inspection lasted 3 uncomfortable seconds. Camille did not move. So, Vivian said, You're the replacement. My name is Camille Brooks. I know what your name is. Helen lowered her eyes. Camille noticed. Vivian walked closer. The agency assured me you were experienced. 8 years in private households. Large households. Some. Vivian's gaze moved over Camille again. The uniforms are fitted. Camille understood exactly what had been implied. She smiled politely. Then I'm fortunate mine fits. Helen coughed into her hand. Vivian's eyes sharpened. Camille's smile remained. A silence passed. Then Vivian turned toward a console table. A vase of white roses stood perfectly centered. She moved it less than an inch. This house has standards. I assumed it did. I dislike excuses. So do I. I expect instructions followed immediately. Camille nodded. That sounds reasonable. Vivian seemed almost disappointed by the answer. Then she stepped closer. The perfume surrounding her was expensive and cold. The others thought they could handle this house too. Camille looked directly into her eyes. Vivian's voice dropped. You won't last. There it was. Not advice. Not warning. A verdict. Camille had heard versions of it before. Too large for the uniform. Too gentle to command respect. Too ordinary for wealthy rooms. People often mistook a kind face for permission. Camille had learned not to correct them too quickly. Sometimes it was useful to discover exactly who someone was first. She tilted her head slightly. Then I suppose one of us will be surprised. Helen froze. Vivian stared at her. For the first time that morning, something cracked through the woman's polished contempt. Not anger. Surprise. From the second-floor landing, unseen by Camille, another figure had stopped. Dominic Whitmore. Tall, broad-shouldered, white, dressed in a charcoal suit, he watched his sister from behind the dark railing. Men across the city feared Dominic's silence more than other men's threats. Yet he said nothing. Not when Vivian walked away. Not when Helen finally exhaled. Not when Camille calmly picked up her suitcase. Dominic simply watched the newest maid follow Helen down the corridor. 6 women had entered that house before Camille Brooks. 6 had eventually chosen the front door. Dominic expected the 7th would do the same. He did not yet understand that Camille had not come to prove how much humiliation she could endure. She had come knowing exactly where kindness ended and dignity began. By the end of Camille Brooks's first week, she understood why 6 women had left the Whitmore mansion. Vivian never shouted. That would have been easier. Instead, she turned humiliation into something precise. On Monday, Camille polished the long walnut dining table until the chandelier reflected across its surface. Vivian entered wearing cream silk and ran one finger along the wood. She examined her fingertip. Again, Camille looked at the spotless table. Is there something I missed? Vivian's eyes lifted. I said again. Camille polished it again. Not because Vivian had proven it dirty. Because Camille was still learning the difference between impossible standards and deliberate cruelty. Tuesday brought tea. Too hot. Camille prepared another cup. Too weak. A third. Vivian took one sip. Cold. Camille glanced at the steaming porcelain. Helen, standing near the pantry door, looked away. Camille said nothing. Wednesday was flowers. Vivian disliked the roses. Then the lilies. Then the arrangement. By Thursday, she had moved from criticizing Camille's work to criticizing Camille herself. You should speak to Helen about another uniform. Camille looked down. Her navy uniform was clean, professionally tailored, and fit comfortably. What's wrong with this one? Vivian's gaze lingered over Camille's plus-size figure. It draws attention. Camille met her eyes. To what? A pause. Vivian had expected embarrassment. Camille gave her none. The household should look refined, Vivian said. I agree. That includes the staff. Camille smiled gently. Then we agree twice. She returned to arranging the breakfast service. Vivian stood there for another moment before walking away. From the hallway, Dominic Whitmore had heard enough to understand what his sister meant. His expression hardened, but he kept walking. That had become Dominic's habit. He managed businesses, alliances, disputes, and men who understood consequences without needing them explained. Vivian was different. She was his younger sister, and guilt had made him dangerously patient with her. That afternoon, Dominic ended a call with one of his captains after settling a dispute between two Whitmore crews with 3 sentences and a silence that ended the argument. Then he found Helen reviewing household invoices. How is the new maid? Helen looked up. You mean, has she quit? Dominic's mouth tightened. Has she? No, will she? Helen removed her glasses. Camille isn't like the others. That's what you said about number 5. Number 5 cried in the laundry room on her second day. Dominic glanced toward the corridor. And Camille? She sings. He looked back. Helen almost smiled. She was folding sheets while Vivian criticized every crease. Camille started humming. Why? I think it annoyed Vivian. A faint amusement touched Dominic's face. Later, passing the laundry room, he heard Camille humming under her breath. He slowed without meaning to. She was smiling at something Helen had said, completely unaware he was there. Dominic moved on before either woman noticed, unsettled by how long the sound stayed with him. This isn't funny, Helen. No, sir. Her expression became serious. 6 good employees left this house because nobody stopped what was happening. The words landed exactly where Helen intended. Dominic's eyes cooled. Careful. I've worked for your family 23 years. Careful is how I survived long enough to say that. Silence. Dominic left without answering. That evening, Camille carried fresh towels upstairs. Vivian stood outside the guest suite. You're late. Camille checked the hallway clock. By 40 seconds. I don't appreciate sarcasm. That wasn't sarcasm. Vivian took one towel from the stack. She unfolded it. Then another. Wrong. Camille frowned. What's wrong? The fold. You asked for thirds. I asked for hotel folds. Yesterday you specifically asked for thirds. Vivian's face remained perfectly calm. Are you calling me a liar? Camille looked at her for several seconds. No, Vivian seemed satisfied. Then Camille added, I'm saying the instruction changed. Helen, approaching from downstairs, stopped halfway up. Vivian's eyes narrowed. You enjoy having the last word. No, Camille shifted the towels against her hip. I enjoy knowing what standard I'm being held to. Vivian stepped closer. And if the standard is whatever I say it is? Camille's gentle expression did not change. Then I'll do my best to meet reasonable instructions. Reasonable. Yes. The word hung between them. Vivian handed back the towel. Refold everyone. Camille nodded. If that's the standard going forward. She turned toward the linen room. Vivian watched her leave. No tears. No slammed door. No resignation. For the first time, cruelty was not producing the result Vivian expected. And that bothered her far more than anger would have. Behind the staircase railing, Dominic watched his sister's face change. He had spent months telling himself the maids were free to leave. Camille Brooks was quietly forcing him to confront a harder truth. People being free to escape mistreatment did not excuse the person allowing it to continue. The first time Camille Brooks said no to Vivian Whitmore, she did not raise her voice. That was what made the word impossible to ignore. It happened on a gray Tuesday morning in the upstairs linen room. Camille had spent nearly 20 minutes folding a stack of fresh white towels exactly the way Vivian had demanded the previous evening. Edges aligned, corners tucked. 3 identical stacks rested neatly on the oak table. Helen inspected them. If those aren't perfect, I'm retiring. Camille smiled. You said that yesterday. Yesterday, I was only considering it. Footsteps approached. Helen's smile disappeared. Vivian entered. Her eyes moved immediately to the towels. What is this? Camille glanced at them. The guest room linens. I can see that. Vivian lifted one towel. She examined the fold, then dropped it. Wrong. Camille remained calm. What would you like changed? Vivian picked up another. This. She tossed it onto the floor. Then another. And another. White towels fell around Camille's shoes. Helen stared. Camille did not move. Vivian swept the final stack from the table with one deliberate motion. The room went silent. Every towel Camille had folded now lay scattered across the floor. Vivian crossed her arms. Do them again. Camille looked down, then back at Vivian. What was wrong with them? I don't need to explain myself to you. If there's a problem with my work, I'll correct it. Vivian pointed toward the floor, then picked them up. Camille's eyes remained steady. No, Helen froze. In the hallway, a man stopped walking. Dominic Whitmore stood just beyond the doorway. Vivian blinked. What did you say? No, the second time was even quieter. Vivian stepped closer. You seem confused about who works for whom. I'm not confused. Then pick them up. Camille looked at the towels. You deliberately threw clean linens onto the floor after I asked what needed correcting. Vivian's cheeks tightened. Pick them up or quit. Helen whispered. Camille. Camille turned briefly toward her. There was no anger on her face, only certainty. Then she faced Vivian again. I'll correct every honest mistake I make. I'll redo work when it needs to be redone. And I'll respect reasonable instructions. She paused. But I won't participate in my own humiliation. Vivian stared at her. You're a maid. Yes. The answer came without shame. That describes my job. It doesn't reduce my dignity. Dominic's expression changed in the doorway. Vivian had not yet noticed him. You think you're special? She asked. No, Camille's voice softened. I think I'm a person. Something about that answer seemed to strike harder than defiance. Vivian looked toward Helen. Tell her. Helen swallowed. Tell her what? That employees follow instructions. Helen looked at the towels, then at Camille. Then, unexpectedly, she bent down. Camille gently touched her arm. No, Mrs. Parker. Helen stopped. Camille turned back to Vivian. If I dropped them accidentally, I'd pick them up. If they were dirty, I'd replace them. But you threw them down because you wanted to see whether I would let you. Vivian's face went cold. You're fired. No, she isn't. Dominic's voice came from the doorway. Everyone turned. He stepped into the room. Vivian stiffened. Dominic, stay out of this. His eyes moved across the scattered towels. Then to Camille. Then back to his sister. I own the house. Vivian's jaw tightened. And she insulted me. Dominic looked at Camille. Did you? No, sir. What did you say? Camille met his gaze. I said no. Silence again. Dominic studied her with an expression she could not read. Then he looked at Vivian. Go downstairs. Vivian stared at him. You're choosing a maid over your own sister? Dominic's face hardened. I'm choosing to find out what happened before I choose anything. Vivian stormed past him. Her footsteps disappeared down the corridor. Helen slowly exhaled. Dominic looked at Camille. My study. 10 minutes. Then he left. Helen stared after him. Camille began gathering her cleaning supplies. Aren't you scared? Helen whispered. Camille looked at the towels still covering the floor. Yes. Helen seemed surprised. Camille picked up none of them. Courage doesn't mean you aren't scared. She walked toward the door. It means fear doesn't get to decide what you're willing to become. And downstairs, behind the closed doors of his study, Dominic Whitmore was already asking himself a question 6 departing maids had never forced him to face. How many times had he called his silence loyalty when it had really been permission? Dominic Whitmore did not ask Camille Brooks to sit when she entered his study. Camille said anyway, not defiantly. There was simply a chair across from his desk, and she had spent enough of her life standing while powerful people decided whether she deserved basic respect. Dominic noticed. He closed the study door. Dark wood covered the walls. Rain pressed softly against tall windows, and behind Dominic stretched shelves filled with books that looked too expensive to have ever been opened. He remained standing. Do you know who my sister is? Camille folded her hands in her lap. Yes. And you still told her no? Yes. Dominic studied her. Most people filled his silences because they feared them. Camille let his silence remain his responsibility. Vivian says you refused a direct instruction. I did. She says you embarrassed her in front of staff. There was one person in the room. Helen. Yes. That still counts. Camille nodded. Then she was embarrassed in front of Helen. Dominic's eyebrow moved slightly. You don't sound sorry. I'm sorry the situation happened. That isn't what I said. No, again, that word. Calm. Clean. Unapologetic. Dominic walked behind his desk. Explain. Camille took a breath. If your sister tells me a bathroom isn't clean enough, I clean it again. If she wants towels folded differently, I fold them differently. If I make a mistake, I own it. And today, she threw properly folded towels onto the floor because she wanted me to pick them up. You're certain that was her intention? Camille looked directly at him. Are you asking because you doubt what you saw, or because admitting what you saw would require you to do something about it? Dominic froze. The room seemed to contract around them. Men who ran Whitmore territory had obeyed Dominic with less resistance. Politicians had lied to him, rivals had threatened him, and business partners had tried to manipulate him. Very few people had spoken to him, as if his power were irrelevant to the truth. You should be careful, he said. Camille's expression remained gentle. I am. That didn't sound careful. Careful and silent aren't the same thing. Dominic slowly Saturday, why didn't you quit? Camille had expected anger. Not that. She looked toward the rain-streaked window. My mother was sick for 4 years. Dominic said nothing. I cared for her while working wherever I could. Hospitals, private homes, night shifts. I learned something during those years. What? People who are hurting can become difficult. Dominic's eyes sharpened. You think Vivian is hurting? I think happy people rarely spend this much energy making strangers feel small. That landed harder than Camille intended. Dominic looked away. For the first time, she saw something beneath his controlled expression. Recognition. Camille continued. But pain doesn't excuse everything. No, I stayed because I need the job. I'm not ashamed of that. Dominic looked back at her. And because leaving every time someone is cruel teaches them cruelty works. Silence. Camille leaned slightly forward. I work for this family, Mr. Whitmore. I'll do the work well. I'll respect your home. I'll respect your sister. She paused. But I don't surrender my dignity to it. Dominic said nothing for several seconds. Then he opened a drawer. Camille's stomach tightened. She expected paperwork. Termination. Instead, Dominic removed a personnel folder. He opened it. 6 names. 6 resignation dates. His eyes moved down the page. 6 women, he said quietly. Camille waited. I told myself they were free to leave. They were. Dominic looked up. That doesn't make what happened acceptable. No, his jaw tightened. There were some truths a man could hear only after he stopped defending himself against them. You're not fired, he said. Camille exhaled slowly. But this isn't permission to challenge Vivian whenever you disagree. I don't intend to. And if she crosses the line again? Camille stood. I'll tell her. Dominic almost smiled. I assumed you might. She reached the door, then glanced back. Their eyes met. Most people looked away when Dominic held their gaze too long. Camille did not. For one quiet second, neither of them was employer or employee, rescuer or rescued. Only 2 people measuring the truth in each other. Camille broke the moment first. Was there anything else? No, Dominic said, though the answer came a fraction too late. Ms. Brooks. Camille turned. Dominic's expression had become serious again. My sister wasn't always like this. Camille watched him carefully. People rarely become cruel for no reason. Dominic looked toward the window. No, Camille waited for more. None came. She left. Dominic remained alone. On his desk lay 6 resignation letters he had once treated as staffing problems. Now they looked different. 6 warnings. 6 opportunities to intervene. 6 times he had protected his sister from consequences because confronting her would have meant confronting something inside himself. Upstairs, Camille returned to the linen room. The towels were no longer on the floor. Vivian was gone. Helen stood beside the table. Who picked them up? Camille asked. Helen pointed toward the doorway. Mr. Whitmore. Camille became still. No announcement. No apology. Just clean white towels returned quietly to the table. It was not justice yet, but for the first time in that house, the person with the most power had bent down to clean up a humiliation he should never have allowed. For 3 days after the linen room confrontation, Vivian Whitmore barely spoke to Camille Brooks. Camille preferred the silence. It was not peace exactly, but it was better than cruelty disguised as instruction. Then, late Friday evening, Camille heard glass break upstairs. She stopped halfway through the east corridor. The sound had come from behind a door she had never seen open. Helen had warned her about it on her first day. Mrs. Whitmore's old room, she had said. Nobody goes in there. Margaret Whitmore, Dominic and Vivian's mother. Camille approached slowly. Another sound came from inside. Not breaking glass this time. Breathing. Fast. Uneven. She knocked. Vivian. No answer. Camille tried again. Are you all right? Go away. The voice barely sounded like Vivian. Camille hesitated. Then the door opened several inches. Vivian stood there barefoot. Her hair, normally immaculate, had fallen loose around her face. Behind her, an antique perfume bottle lay shattered across the hardwood floor. Boxes covered the room. Photographs. Old dresses. Letters tied with ribbon. A life packed away but never released. Camille looked at Vivian. You're bleeding. A thin red line marked her palm. It's nothing. It's glass. I said I'm fine. Vivian turned too quickly. Her breathing caught. She grabbed the edge of a dresser. Camille stepped forward instinctively. Vivian recoiled. Don't touch me. Camille stopped immediately. All right. That seemed to confuse her. No argument. No wounded expression. Just respect. Camille found a small first aid kit in the adjoining bathroom and placed it on the dresser. Then she noticed a framed photograph. A younger Vivian sat beside an elegant woman with silver-streaked hair. Dominic stood behind them. He was smiling. Camille had never seen him smile like that. My mother, Vivian said. Camille looked at her. I guessed. Vivian sank onto the floor beside an open box. She wore that perfume. Her eyes moved toward the broken bottle. Today would have been her birthday. The cruelty Camille knew seemed to disappear. Beneath something much older. Grief. Camille sat several feet away. Not beside her. Not close enough to make comfort feel like intrusion. Vivian stared at the photograph. She was sick for 11 months. Camille's expression softened. I'm sorry. I took care of her. Here. Vivian nodded. Dominic paid for everything. Nurses. Specialists. Equipment. A bitter laugh escaped her. He could buy anything except more time. Camille said nothing. He was always working. Vivian's voice tightened. Always handling something important. And you stayed. I was her daughter. The answer came sharply. Then Vivian's anger collapsed as quickly as it had appeared. I was terrified. Camille understood better than Vivian knew. My mother was sick too. For years. For the first time, Vivian's eyes held no contempt. Only recognition. Did she? Yes. Camille did not elaborate. She did not need to. For a moment, grief erased the distance between their very different worlds. Vivian looked down at her injured hand. I suppose this is the part where you tell me grief made me horrible. No, Vivian frowned. Camille nodded toward the first aid kit. This is the part where you clean that cut. Despite herself, Vivian almost smiled. Almost. She opened the kit. Camille remained where she was. You're not going to tell Dominic? About what? This. Camille looked around the room. That you miss your mother? Vivian's face hardened defensively. That I lost control. Camille considered her answer. If you were in danger, I would. I'm not. Then this belongs to you. Vivian stared at her. Perhaps she had expected revenge. Camille had every reason to expose this vulnerable moment after everything Vivian had done. Instead, Camille stood. At the doorway, Vivian spoke. Why are you being kind to me? Camille turned. Her face remained gentle. Because your pain is real. Vivian looked away. Then Camille added quietly. But so is everyone else's. She left before Vivian could answer. Downstairs, Dominic stood alone beside the staircase. He had heard enough to know where Camille had been. Their eyes met. Camille said nothing. Neither did he. For years, Dominic had treated Vivian's grief like a locked room, something easier to leave untouched. Camille had entered that room and done something far more difficult. She had shown compassion without surrendering the truth. And upstairs, surrounded by memories she could neither control nor command, Vivian Whitmore began to understand something that frightened her more than Camille's defiance ever had. The woman she had tried hardest to drive away had just seen her at her weakest and chosen not to hurt her. The next morning, Vivian Whitmore said something Camille Brooks had not heard from her before. "Good morning." Camille paused beside the breakfast table. Vivian was seated near the window, coffee untouched before her. No criticism, no inspection, no command disguised as conversation. Camille answered gently, "Good morning." Then she continued working. That was all. Helen nearly dropped the silverware. Later, Camille found Vivian standing beside the white roses in the foyer. "You didn't tell Dominic," Vivian said. "No, why?" "I told you why." Vivian turned toward her. "You could have embarrassed me." Camille adjusted one of the flowers. "Yes. After everything I've done to you." "Yes." The honesty stung more than denial would have. Vivian folded her arms. "You think that makes you better than me?" Camille looked at her. "No, then what do you think?" Camille considered the question. Pain can explain cruelty. It can't excuse it. Vivian's jaw tightened. "You think you understand me?" "No. I understand losing a mother. But your grief belongs to you. It doesn't belong to Helen, the 6 women who left, or me." Vivian looked toward the staircase. "He left me here with her." Camille knew immediately who she meant. Dominic. When she got worse, he kept saying he was handling things. Vivian's voice became brittle. Doctors. Money. Security. Everything except sitting beside her. Camille remained silent. "The night she died, I called him 3 times. Vivian swallowed. He came too late. From the shadowed hallway beyond the foyer, Dominic stopped. Neither woman saw him. "I hated him for it," Vivian whispered. "Do you still?" Vivian laughed bitterly. "I don't know." Camille nodded. "That sounds more honest." Vivian's eyes sharpened. "You're very comfortable telling people the truth." "No. The truth is usually uncomfortable." For the first time, Vivian almost smiled. Then it vanished. "What am I supposed to do with all of this?" Camille shook her head. "I don't know. You have an answer for everything else." "No, I have boundaries." "That's different." Vivian stared at her. Camille left respectful space between them. "I can care that you're hurting without letting you hurt me." The grandfather clock ticked through the silence. Vivian looked down. When those other women quit, Camille waited. "I told myself they were weak. And now?" Vivian's eyes glistened, though no tears fell. "Maybe I needed them to leave." "Why?" "Because every time someone stayed, I had to wonder whether I was becoming someone my mother wouldn't recognize." Camille's expression softened. That was the first real admission. Not redemption. Not yet. But truth. From the hallway, Dominic quietly stepped backward before either woman noticed him. For years, he had told himself Vivian's anger was grief. That explanation had allowed him to avoid confronting her. Now he understood something Camille had understood immediately. Compassion without boundaries was not kindness. Sometimes it was permission. That afternoon, Vivian criticized the arrangement of the dining room. Her old tone returned. Camille felt disappointment rise. Change, she reminded herself, was rarely a straight line. Then Vivian stopped halfway through a sentence. She looked at Camille. "I'm doing it again." Camille said nothing. Vivian inhaled. "The table is fine." She walked away. Helen stared after her. "What just happened?" Camille resumed setting the plates. "Something small." That evening, Vivian passed Camille near the staircase. She stopped. "Good night, Camille." Camille smiled. "Good night, Vivian." After Vivian disappeared upstairs, Dominic stepped from the library carrying his own coffee. "You always know what everyone else in this house needs," he said. Camille raised an eyebrow. "That sounds suspiciously like a complaint." "It's a question." He hesitated. "What do you want when you're not fixing our household?" Camille studied him, surprised that he had asked about her rather than Vivian. "A quiet kitchen. Good music. Somewhere I don't have to be useful every minute." Dominic's mouth softened. "That sounds difficult to arrange here, especially with your family." He laughed, briefly, genuinely. Camille found herself smiling back. "Good night, Mr. Whitmore." "Dominic," he said. She paused. "Good night, Dominic." Neither woman knew that within days, a dinner inside that mansion would drag every buried wound into public view. But for now, something quieter had happened. A woman who had spent months controlling everyone around her had finally controlled one thing that mattered: herself. The dinner began beneath candlelight and ended with one sentence no one in the room could pretend not to hear. Dominic Whitmore had invited 12 guests to the mansion that evening: business associates, attorneys, and 2 longtime family friends. Camille Brooks moved quietly between the dining room and kitchen while Helen supervised service. Vivian sat at Dominic's right. From the moment she entered, Camille knew something was wrong. Vivian wore a black dress and her mother's pearl earrings. Her posture was perfect. Her smile was not. Earlier that afternoon, Helen had quietly told Camille the date. 3 years ago tonight, Margaret Whitmore had died. Camille had expected Vivian to cancel dinner. Instead, she seemed determined to prove she could survive it without anyone noticing. For the first hour, she succeeded. Then one of Dominic's guests, Charles Mercer, stood to reach for a document. His elbow struck his wine glass. Red wine spilled across the table. A dark stain spread over the ivory linen. Vivian froze. The conversation continued for half a second, then stopped. Camille immediately approached with a clean cloth. "It's all right. I can. What did you do?" Vivian's voice cut through the room. Camille stopped. Charles looked uncomfortable. "Actually, Vivian, that was me." Vivian did not seem to hear him. Her eyes remained fixed on the spreading stain. "That tablecloth belonged to my mother." Camille softened her voice. "I understand. Let me treat it before it sets." She reached forward. Vivian slapped the cloth from Camille's hand. Not hard, but deliberate. The cloth fell to the floor. Dominic slowly stood. "Vivian." His sister's breathing changed. "This should never have happened." Charles spoke again. "I knocked over the glass." But Vivian was no longer responding to facts. She was responding to memory. Her eyes filled. Then grief became anger. And anger searched for somewhere easier to land. She found Camille. "You ruin everything you touch." The room went silent. Helen stopped in the doorway. Camille stared at Vivian. Days earlier, she had seen this woman barefoot beside her mother's belongings. She had protected that vulnerability. She had offered compassion without demanding gratitude. And now Vivian had chosen to humiliate her in front of a room full of people. Camille looked down at her apron. Slowly, she untied it. Dominic's face hardened. Vivian gave a bitter laugh. "There, just like the others." Camille folded the apron once, then placed it carefully on the table. "No, Vivian." Vivian's expression changed. Camille met her eyes. "Not this time." She pointed gently toward Charles. "Mr. Mercer accidentally knocked over the wine. He admitted it immediately." Charles nodded. "I did." Camille continued. "I came to help save your mother's tablecloth." Vivian's lips parted. "And you knew that?" Silence. Camille's voice remained calm. "I will not accept blame for something I didn't do simply because I'm the easiest person in this room to blame." Vivian glanced around the table. Every guest was watching. Her face flushed. "You're embarrassing me." Camille's eyes softened. "No," she paused. "I'm refusing to let you embarrass me." The distinction landed across the room. Dominic said nothing. Not yet. This was Camille's truth to speak. Vivian's eyes glistened. "You don't understand what that tablecloth means." "I understand more than you think." Camille lowered her voice. "But loving the person who owned it doesn't give you permission to mistreat the person trying to save it." Vivian went still. Camille picked up the fallen cloth. Not because Vivian had thrown it. Because now there was wine spreading across something precious. And there was useful work to do. She pressed it gently against the stain. Charles stepped forward. "I'm sorry, Vivian." Vivian looked at him. Then at Camille. Then at her brother. Dominic's expression carried something she had not seen from him in years. Not protection. Accountability. Vivian pushed back her chair. "I can't do this." She hurried from the room. No one moved. Dominic looked toward his guests. "Dinner is over." His voice was quiet. No one argued. Within minutes, chairs emptied and coats disappeared through the foyer. Camille remained beside the stained tablecloth. Dominic approached her. "I should have stopped this sooner." Camille looked at him. "Yes." No comfort. No absolution. Just truth. Upstairs, a door slammed. Dominic glanced toward the staircase. For years, he had protected Vivian from consequences because he believed he owed her that much. Tonight, Camille had forced him to see the cost. His guilt had never healed his sister. It had only given her somewhere else to put her pain. Dominic turned toward the stairs. This time, he would not remain in the doorway. Dominic Whitmore found Vivian in their mother's room, standing beside the broken perfume bottle Camille had quietly left untouched days earlier. Vivian did not turn when he entered. "Go away." "No," the word made her look back. For a moment, neither sibling spoke. Dominic closed the door behind him. "You embarrassed me tonight," Vivian said. "No, you embarrassed yourself." Her face hardened. So now you're taking her side. This isn't about sides. It always is with you. Dominic's jaw tightened. I heard what you told Camille. Vivian froze. The night Mom died. The calls. Her eyes changed. You were listening? Part of it. Then you know. Yes. You came too late. I know. 3 words stripped the anger from Vivian's face more effectively than any defense could have. Dominic stepped closer. I told myself I was protecting this family. I could settle disputes across the city, move men with one call, make problems disappear before they reached our door. I paid doctors. I handled everything except the one thing Mom and you actually needed from me, my presence. His voice lowered. I was wrong. Vivian looked away. And I left you carrying what I should have helped carry. Tears filled her eyes. You don't get to apologize 3 years later and make it disappear. I'm not asking you to. Silence. Dominic continued. But my guilt made me excuse things I should have stopped. Vivian stared at him. The staff. The insults. 6 women leaving this house. You're blaming me? No, his answer was immediate. I'm finally refusing to protect either of us from responsibility. Vivian's breathing became shallow. I lost Mom. So did I. You weren't here. No, the admission landed quietly. Dominic did not defend himself. Then his expression hardened. But Camille didn't abandon you. Helen didn't abandon you. Those 6 women didn't abandon you. Vivian lowered her eyes. You punished people who had nothing to do with what happened. A knock sounded. Camille stood in the doorway. I'm sorry. Helen said you wanted me. Dominic nodded. Vivian looked mortified. I'm not doing this in front of her. You humiliated her in front of 12 people. Camille's expression tightened. Mr. Whitmore. Dominic looked at her. Consequences are necessary, Camille said. Humiliation isn't. Vivian stared at her. Even now, even after dinner, Camille was refusing revenge. Dominic exhaled slowly. You're right. He turned back to Vivian. You will no longer supervise household staff. Vivian said nothing. You'll apologize to Helen and Camille. I'll contact the former employees and make sure any wages, references, or employment matters were handled fairly. Vivian swallowed. And me? You get help. Her face hardened again. I'm not insane. I didn't say you were. Dominic's voice softened. You're grieving. You're angry. And you've been using control to avoid dealing with both. Vivian looked toward Camille. And if I refuse? Dominic paused. Then you cannot continue living here. The room became completely still. Vivian stared at her brother as if he had struck the foundation beneath her. You'd throw your own sister out? I would stop allowing this house to become a place where everyone else has to suffer so we don't have to face what happened to us. Tears finally slipped down Vivian's cheeks. Camille stepped forward. Not to rescue her. Not to erase the consequence. Vivian. Vivian looked at her. Getting help isn't losing. A bitter laugh escaped her. Easy for you to say. No, Camille's eyes softened. My mother died too. I spent years pretending being strong meant never admitting what it did to me. Vivian wiped her cheek. What if I can't change? Camille considered that. Then start smaller. How? Next time you hurt someone, don't explain why. Vivian frowned. Do what? Own it. Silence. Vivian looked toward the floor. Then toward Camille. I blamed you tonight because I panicked. Camille waited. You were trying to help. Yes. Vivian struggled with the next words. I'm sorry. Camille nodded. Thank you. No embrace followed. No instant forgiveness. Nothing magical changed. But Dominic watched his sister stand inside the room where their family had broken and finally accept responsibility without hiding behind grief. For years, he had believed power meant protecting the people he loved from consequences. Camille had taught him something harder. Real protection sometimes meant refusing to let someone become cruel simply because you understood why they were hurting. And that night, justice entered the Whitmore mansion without threats, revenge, or applause. It arrived as a boundary, and for the first time, everyone inside had to respect it. 6 months later, the sound of laughter in the Whitmore mansion no longer made the staff wonder who would be punished for it. The house had changed. Not completely, not magically, but honestly. Camille Brooks stood in the main hallway reviewing the weekly household schedule when Helen approached with a young woman wearing a new staff uniform. Camille, this is Rachel. She starts today. Rachel smiled nervously. Camille extended her hand. Welcome. As Helen began explaining the household routine, Rachel glanced toward the staircase. Can I ask something? Helen sighed. You heard the stories. Rachel lowered her voice. Is it true 6 maids quit before Camille? A familiar voice answered from behind them. Yes. Vivian Whitmore descended the stairs. Rachel stiffened. Vivian stopped at the bottom. Because of me. No excuse followed. No explanation about grief. No attempt to soften what she had done. Camille noticed that 6 months had not transformed Vivian into someone endlessly cheerful. She still had difficult mornings. She still became controlling when anxiety tightened around her. But now she recognized it. She apologized. She attended therapy twice a week. And when she failed, she no longer demanded that everyone else pretend she had not. I'm sorry, Rachel said awkwardly. Vivian gave a faint smile. Don't be. Just don't let old stories convince you people can't write better ones. Then she walked toward the breakfast room. Helen stared after her. Well, Camille smiled. Something small. Helen laughed. Not anymore. Camille's own life had changed too. 3 months earlier, Dominic had promoted her to household operations manager. She had initially refused. I don't want a reward for surviving your sister. Dominic had looked almost offended. It isn't one. He had shown her the household records. Schedules she had improved. Vendor costs she had reduced. Staff turnover she had stabilized. You earned it. Only then had Camille accepted. That afternoon, Dominic found her in the linen room. He leaned against the doorway. You still fold those yourself? Sometimes. You have staff. So do you. Yet occasionally I see you carrying your own coffee. Dominic smiled. Camille noticed he had begun finding small reasons to stop by rooms she happened to be in, and Dominic had noticed she no longer called every conversation with him work. Neither mentioned it. Respect had come first, and neither wanted to rush what might be growing after it. Camille picked up a stack of white towels. At that moment, Vivian entered carrying fresh linens. She turned too quickly. The towels slipped from her arms. They scattered across the floor. Silence. All three looked down. For a heartbeat, the room seemed to travel backward 6 months. White towels. A cold command. A woman being told to surrender her dignity or leave. Vivian looked at Camille. Camille raised one eyebrow. Don't say it, Vivian muttered. I wasn't going to. Dominic covered a smile. Vivian bent down. One towel. Then another. Then another. She gathered everyone herself. No servant summoned. No blame assigned. No humiliation passed downward simply because she had the power to pass it. Camille crouched and picked up the final towel. Vivian looked at her. You don't have to. I know. Their eyes met. That was the difference. Camille helped because she chose to. Vivian accepted because she no longer believed kindness meant submission. Together, they placed the towels on the table. Vivian hesitated. I never properly thanked you. For what? For staying. Camille shook her head gently. Don't thank me for enduring what shouldn't have happened. Vivian absorbed that. Then what should I thank you for? Camille smiled. For believing me when I told you no. Vivian's eyes softened. I didn't. Not then. No. Camille glanced at the neatly stacked towels. But eventually you listened. Vivian nodded and left. Dominic remained in the doorway. You changed this house, he said. Camille looked at him. No, Dominic waited. I drew a line. What happened afterward depended on whether the people standing on the other side were willing to change. His expression softened. And if we hadn't, I would have left. Dominic laughed quietly. I believe you. He stepped aside, then stopped her before she reached the hallway. Camille. She turned. For once, Dominic Whitmore looked less certain than men across the city believed him capable of being. Would you let me buy you dinner sometime when neither of us is discussing my sister, my staff, or this house? Camille regarded him for a long second. Ask me again when I'm off the clock. A slow smile appeared. Is that a no? Camille's eyes warmed. You of all people should know I say no very clearly. She continued down the hallway, leaving Dominic smiling behind her. 6 women had left the Whitmore mansion because cruelty had been allowed to call itself grief, loyalty, and family. The 7th stayed long enough to call it by its real name. She did not defeat Vivian. She did not rescue Dominic. She simply refused to become smaller so someone else could feel powerful. And in the end, the strongest word ever spoken inside the Whitmore mansion was not a threat, an order, or a command. It was one quiet word from a woman who knew exactly what her dignity was worth. No.